please myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste.
We do want to start today by acknowledging the news about former President Biden's cancer diagnosis. It's obviously significant, and like so many, we wish him, a swift and full recovery.
Absolutely. It's one of those moments where politics sort of falls away, and you saw that, I think, in the bipartisan expressions of sympathy. It's a human thing.
It really is. But our job here is always to look a bit deeper, right? To connect the dots based on the information out there. And a question is definitely, popping up across various discussions we've looked at.
Which is?
Was the timing of this announcement purely coincidental? I mean, it landed right after her audio tapes became public and just before this original Sin book release.
And sort of tied into that, the question of whether the diagnosis itself, or maybe its seriousness, was actually known earlier, potentially kept under wraps.
Exactly. These are the threads we need to pull on today. It's the convergence of these specific events that's really driving the speculation.
Right. And our goal is to explore what our sources are actually saying about these potential links, these questions.
Yeah. So for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a mix. We're looking at bits from YouTube transcripts, discussions on Rising, Gutfeld, The Guy Benson Show, On Balance.
Also segments specifically titled, "The Left Lied to Us About Everything." Trump accuses Biden admin of using autopin for everything, and one from Waters. So a real range of viewpoints.
Definitely. And they all touch on this timeline, the potential implications, the media's angle on it.
Looking at it from these different perspectives, hopefully helps build a clearer picture of the debate that's happening.
Okay, so the mission for you, listening right now, is to explore these questions with us. The timing, the possibility of prior knowledge, the media's role. Let's get into it. First off, David Axelrod seemed to suggest that, maybe the diagnosis should pause the talk about Biden's cognitive state.
Which, on a human level, you can understand that impulse. Empathy first.
But then you have the counterpoint,
Yeah.
very strongly, from folks on Rising and others. They're highlighting what they see as, frankly, suspicious timing.
Yeah, they connect it directly to the Her Tapes Coming Out tapes, which they argue kind of blew up the official White House story about his memory being sharp.
And then, boom, the original Sin book is on the horizon, apparently talking about how his campaign tried to limit scrutiny, maybe because of concerns about his fitness even back then. It does feel like a very compressed time frame for all this.
That's really the core tension, isn't it? The idea presented is, can you feel sympathy for his health situation and still demand answers about transparency, especially regarding the leader's condition?
The sources raising questions argue, yes, you can. They point to what they perceive as a pattern, maybe, of not being fully upfront, which fuels that mistrust.
So it becomes this clash between a natural human response and a push for what some see as necessary public accountability, a really tricky line to walk when talking about a president's health.
No kidding. And it's that backdrop, those existing questions about cognitive fitness, that really seems to pour fuel on the fire regarding any potential cover-up narrative.
Well, yeah, think about the Her report itself. I mean, describing a president as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, that's quite something.
It's blunt. And the specifics cited from the audio recordings, forgetting when he left office, forgetting when Trump was elected, even reportedly the year his son Beau died.
These aren't trivial details. They're major life events, political milestones. So when you already have those kinds of specific memory concerns documented by a special counsel,
then the timing of a major health announcement like this inevitably gets scrutinized much more closely.
Exactly. And then add in this upcoming book, Original Sin. You mentioned Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. The reporting suggests it details what elaborate steps.
Right. Steps taken by campaign staff to limit his interactions with the press. And the interpretation in our sources is pretty clear. They suggest this points to an internal awareness, even back then, of, diminished capacity, as some put it.
And what's really striking is comparing that to what we were hearing publicly from Democratic leaders around that time.
Like Chuck Schumer, right. Some sources quote him saying Biden's mind was as sharp as ever, essentially.
Yeah. Words to that effect, strong endorsements of his mental acuity. But now you contrast that with the Her report, with these alleged details from Original Sin.
And you can see why the cover-up narrative gains traction. It raises questions about who knew what and when and how it was being presented versus, perhaps, the internal reality.
Precisely. Okay, so let's pivot to the diagnosis itself. Amidst all these cognitive questions, we get the announcement. aggressive prostate cancer, stage 4, spread to the bones. And immediately in the sources, there's this reaction of surprise, not just at the diagnosis, but that it was apparently newly discovered at such an advanced stage.
Yeah, that's a key point. Presidents get top-tier medical care, regular checkups, and for prostate cancer, there's the PSA test, right? Prostate-specific antigen.
It's a standard screening tool, often catches things early.
And this is where it gets, well, interesting, according to these discussions. They point out that Presidents Trump, Obama, George W. Bush, they all had their PSA levels included in their public medical reports.
But that specific number was apparently missing from President Biden's most recent public physical summary. That omission is being flagged big time.
It definitely raises eyebrows, and that lack of a PSA number combined with a stage 4 diagnosis.
It's leading to some pretty strong opinions from medical figures cited in our sources.
Like Dr. Howard Foreman from Yale, quoted as finding it almost inconceivable it wasn't picked up sooner. And Dr. Zeke Emanuel, who actually advised Biden, suggesting it's highly probable the cancer was there for years.
Emanuel apparently even said Biden had it while he was president, probably at the start of his presidency in 2021.
Right, and some speculation even pushes that timeline back further, maybe developing over a decade. We also heard it mentioned that Biden himself apparently noticed urinary symptoms, which led to the tests.
But the argument being made is that a stage 4 diagnosis often doesn't just appear out of the blue like that. Standard screenings, blood tests, they usually provide earlier warnings.
And then you have Dr. Ronnie Jackson weighing in. He was White House doctor, treated Biden as VP.
Right, and his take is pretty pointed. He's quoted suggesting Biden's current physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, and yeah, let's clarify, it's O'Connor, not O'Connell, as one source briefly mentioned that Dr. O'Connor was maybe more concerned about assisting with the political cover-up than providing world-class medical care.
That is a heavy accusation from a former White House physician. Wow.
It really is, and it feeds this other very serious line of speculation we see. Could potential, maybe secret cancer treatments explain some of the cognitive issues that have been reported?
Like it's a side effect. That implies a whole other level of trying to manage his health privately while perhaps downplaying any public impact.
Exactly. And this brings us squarely to that larger cover-up narrative. You hear it loud and clear from places like Gutfeld or commentators like Mark Halperin. They're not mincing words.
No, they're calling it a cover-up. Some even suggesting it might be like the biggest media scandal in American history. Strong stuff.
The comparison to the tobacco industry hiding smoking risks even comes up that level of alleged concealment of vital information.
And a major part of this argument is that the media, or at least significant parts of it, provided cover for the Democrats on these issues. Didn't ask the tough questions.
Yeah, and supporting that, one source mentions a former Democratic advisor saying, essentially, that even Democrats knew there were private concerns about Biden's age and fitness.
So the narrative is that the party line about his fitness was maybe accepted too readily by some media outlets.
Right. And while some journalists are asking questions now, the critique is that there's maybe not enough reflection on how this was covered or not covered previously. Accountability, you know.
So if these allegations, this idea of a cover-up, actually hold weight, what are the potential consequences being discussed? What actions are being called for?
Well, Bill O'Reilly, for instance, makes a pretty stark point. He argues that if there was a deliberate concealment of the diagnosis, people involved potentially, including Dr. O'Connor, could face serious legal trouble.
Legal trouble, how so?
For misleading the public, potentially violating obligations as civil servants regarding honest reporting of health information. O'Reilly even mentions potential felony charges if it was proven Dr. O'Connor knowingly hid the diagnosis or skipped standard tests for political reasons.
Wow, okay, so O'Reilly's calling for a congressional investigation.
Yes, specifically into this. Getting Dr. O'Connor under oath, asking point blank, when did you know? Was there pressure to conceal it?
And we hear similar sentiments elsewhere. Jim Jordan's quoted basically saying the left lied about everything, including Biden's mental state.
There's this consistent theme across these sources. The public deserves answers. When did key White House figures know about any health issues, cognitive or physical?
The argument fundamentally is that hiding a president's potential unfitness for any health reason isn't just politics. It's framed as a breach of trust, even a potential threat to democracy.
And you even have former President Trump jumping in, suggesting Biden's aides knew about his limitations and maybe use them to their advantage. It's all contributing to this very charged atmosphere.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves us and you with some really critical questions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Was information about President Biden's health deliberately managed, perhaps even concealed, both cognitively and physically?
And if so, what were the potential motivations? Political expediency? Something else? And crucially, what was the media's role in all of this? Watchdog? Or, as some allege, complicit?
It's incredibly complex. That natural human sympathy for someone facing cancer is real and important.
Right.
But the sources we've looked at argue that sympathy can't erase the need for transparency and accountability when it comes to the health of the person holding the highest office. They aren't necessarily mutually exclusive concerns.
But navigating that is tough. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on. If any of these allegations about concealment are true, what does that really mean for public trust? Trust in politicians, sure, but also trust in the institutions, including the medical professionals involved and the media that are supposed to keep us informed.
What other questions does this whole situation raise for you about where we draw the line between privacy, public health, and the people's right to know about the fitness of their leaders? A lot to think about there.